Amy Spiro is a reporter with the Jerusalem Post and joins me now from Jerusalem. Amy, there has been international condemnation of what happened on the border over the last few days. Many countries saying there was a disproportionate use of force. But I wonder how Israelis feel, how divided they are about what they witnessed and whether or not they agree with what Mr. Netanyahu has just been saying.
Hi, thank you for having me. Whether or not they agree with Netanyahu's statements about paying off the protesters, it's certain that Israelis are concerned about what's going on the border and are concerned mostly about attempts to breach the Gaza-Israeli border. You can see from videos that people are attaching explosive devices to the border, are sending over Molotov cocktails, and Israelis are concerned, from historical evidence that people who do breach the border may be looking to carry out terrorist attacks in Israel. Many, Hamas operatives obviously have stated their intention to carry out such attacks.
So Amy, would
Israelis
you say
are looking on with concern?
Would you say most Israelis support the use of live ammunition against those Palestinian civilians?
Specifically about live ammunition, I don't know that I can speak for most Israelis. I think certainly that they support the IDF's intentions to prevent people from crossing the border. The IDF does use other, non-live ammunition. They've used tear gas and they've dropped flyers telling people not to approach the border. Whether or not they specifically support the use of live ammunition, I can't specifically speak to.
We did see scenes in Tel Aviv the other night of thousands of people coming to celebrate Israel's Eurovision win. At the same time, there's this horrific violence taking place. Is there a bit of a disconnect in Israeli society with what is going on? A sense, perhaps, of apathy? I don't know if you could call it necessarily a disconnect. I mean, Israel in its short 70 years has lived through many wars, many terrorist attacks, so many other things. And, Israelis have always continued to live their lives. Israel was very happy to win the Eurovision earlier this week, and so they wanted to celebrate it. There were some counter protests of people who said, this is insensitive, but, when America is at war in Iraq and Afghanistan, no one expects the American people to not go out to cultural events and to not celebrate things. And I think Israelis mostly see this the same way. They're concerned about what's going on, but they're also continuing with their lives. But with Mr. Netanyahu and Donald Trump and the alliance we see between them, does anyone in Israel even talk about the possibility of peace now?
At the embassy event, you saw Jared Kushner speaking about peace. The Trump administration has spoken repeatedly about a peace plan that it's intending to put forward. Nobody has very many details of that. Certainly Israel is, interested to see what that may be. Israeli leaders do speak a bit about peace, but it's hard for them to necessarily, when they're watching what's going on the Gaza border and they're watching Hamas's rhetoric, so it's hard to talk about peace. But it's certainly not something I would say is off the table or out of the question by any means.
Amy, thanks so much for joining us from Jerusalem. Amy Spiro there with the Jerusalem Post. And in the next half hour on GMT, we'll be back live in Jerusalem to speak with a Palestinian, Huda Aman. She'll tell us her thoughts on the US moving their embassy to her home city.